All right, good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch, everybody. I would like to introduce Tierney James. She's going to be our speaker today for this session. She has been in education for over 30 years, and she recently stopped teaching to become an author full-time. And she is an Amazon best-selling author for 2 series, her Enigma series and Dark Side series. She has traveled extensively through Africa, Asia, and Europe, from the Great Wall of China to the floating Okavango Delta of Botswana. And she likes to use her experiences to weave into her adventures that she loves to write. Her Winds of Deception book that she's been working on, she's been working with one of the crew members of the USS Liberty, hoping to obtain the Medal of Honor for him. And she also works with Mission Canine Rescue to create a children's book about the 4-footed soldiers that save lives. And when she's not writing, she works on creating workshops for beginning writers. So I'd like to welcome Tierney James. Thank you.
Yay, yay.
All right, did everybody get your plot and structure handout? Okay. Glad you all are here. Some of those things that she mentioned have already come and gone. We did Winds of Deception with one of the USS Liberty members, and Congress decided that since the 1967 happened so long ago, they weren't too interested in giving out the Medal of Honor for him. And so I don't know how that's going to eventually play out, but anyway, he's very deserving. I hope you look up the USS Liberty and see what kinds of things happen. So today we're talking about plot and structure, and you can go ahead and do that. So when we talk about plot, that is the structure actually of your novel or your story. There are 3 parts, which is the beginning, the middle, and the end. And even though it seems very simple that, oh yes, I know there has to be 3 parts to a story, a lot of people don't put everything in it that they need. For instance, at the beginning, you must introduce the hero and the villain and the story itself. What is going to happen? What is the dramatic question that needs to be asked? And prologues are great for setting up a story, setting up a plot. For instance, in Invisible Goodbye, if you remember several years ago, there was a plane that crashed in the Indian Ocean and they never found it, took off from Malaysia. So as long ago as that was, I thought, that's going to make a great story because it was never found. So in my book, that it took off and it disappeared. But who should find it? The Russians. The Russians find it. So, and the interesting thing in true life, that plane had 22 American engineers and scientists on board. And they were developing, and they were working in Texas on the project that cloaks things. So in my book, I took that information. All those scientists are now working for the Russians. So you start with the plot, you introduce that mystery right there. In the middle, you make the hero's quest difficult. We got to get those scientists back before they give too much away, and make sure that it's possible for them to give it back. You can also have subplots at this time. Maybe there's something going on between 2 of the characters, or maybe their family is in jeopardy because the Russians have found out that we're on to them. All right, and then of course at the end of your story, your structure, you have to answer all those dramatic questions. If your question is whether Prince will find Cinderella, then you better make sure that the prince does find Cinderella. Has anybody seen the new Cinderella story on Prime? It's not your typical Cinderella. Be sure that you try and watch it if you can. Anyway, you can always and a lot of people suggest that you start writing the end before you write the beginning, because that way you know what you've got to do to get to that end. Now you can always change it, but that can be part of your structure. All right, so if you'll do the next one. Now, we have 7 types of plots that are ask dramatic questions. One of them is tragedy. Okay, so when we talk about a tragedy plot, your main character should undergo a major misfortune, almost always good to bad, or happy to sad. Tragic characters have to suffer. All right, so if you think about Macbeth or Shawshank Redemption, Time to Kill, Time for Mercy by Grisham, he made those stories sad. He also made them seem like that it wasn't going to be possible to solve this. All right, but when we're talking about the next one, which is a comedy story, in comedy, even though your characters have defects, their defects should never wind up being painful. As a matter of fact, your comic characters always come out unscathed. I don't know if you've ever watched the old, I think it was in the 1940s, the Ginger Rogers and Cornell Wilde movie, It Had to Be You. Everything was always going wrong. You didn't think there was going to get any solution, but it was hilarious. And they all came out unscathed at the end. A lot of times there's even a happy ending. Then number 3, we're talking about the hero's journey. And the hero in the story must undergo 2 things. 1, recognition, and the second one is reversal of the situation. Something has to happen to that character outside and inspires the hero to get things done. Something that they didn't realize that was even possible. Then he has to take the quest of getting it done. The next one is rags to riches. Can you think of a famous rags to riches story? Cinderella. How about Pretty Woman? Who refers to Cinderella during the movie? Yes, all of those things are a rags to riches story. The classic fairy tale talks about how she's an underdog, she's mistreated, she's struggling, and we so are sympathetic with her and want her to be successful. All right, the next one is rebirth. The rebirth style of a plot follows a character's transformation from bad to good. I like to take a bad character and make it good. Find out that he has some redeeming qualities. I bet when you have watched, of course, this guy has no redeeming qualities. If you've watched Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and the guy who plays Alan Rickman's part,
The sheriff.
the sheriff of Nottingham. I don't know about you guys, but he was my favorite character. He had no redeeming qualities, but some characters do. And in my books, I like to take a character like Dr. Nicholas Zorich, who in another life was an artist. But because of events that happened to his family and were murdered, he now works for the government and he tortures people to get the information out so that Americans will be safer. So, but he has a weakness for our main character, Tessa Scott. He's promised to protect her because she reminds him of a life he used to have. So, rebirth. We take a series of events and put them into motion by the protagonist or the narrator. Now, if you'll take a character that needs to be redeeming, what about the Beast in The Beauty and the Beast? You know, he's not very nice, but by the end, he has softened up, he has been redeemed. All right, so the next one is overcoming the monster. Otherwise is known as good versus evil plot. Now, if you think about a famous evil guy, right now, just Darth Vader come to mind. Darth Vader was evil. He was always throwing obstacles in front of the hero. But by the end, he does a flip and he does become a better person. So that is one way that we can overturn the monster. And then the last, the other one is voyage and return. What that basically means is that the plot is simply you go from point A to point B, then back to point A again, and the protagonist sets off on the journey to find something, either about himself or a situation, how to resolve an experience. Sometimes they even find treasure. So you might think about, as far as that overturning the monster goes, you might think of Jurassic Park too. I left that one out. But voyage and return, the person is on a quest to find out something, whether it's about themselves or something else. Okay. All right, elements of dramatic structure. The plot structure of a play is usually we have the exposition. Now, what that is, this is often information that happens before the story even begins. You can do that in like a prologue. How many of you write prologues for your books or like books that have prologues in them? It kind of sets up the story, doesn't it? Maybe the house burned down the block and we don't know who burned it down. But then 20 years later, all of a sudden, the children or whoever lived there, they have something that they want to reveal. All right, conflict. The problem of obstacles is a literary character must overcome. Maybe a struggle between opposing forces, between good and bad, between maybe characters that work for the government and those who don't. Maybe it's between the FBI and the president. Maybe it's between the school teacher and the school board, but opposing conflicts really help move your story along. Then we have the climax turning point. That simply is the action that you find in the story. And then the following action is actions as events that happen after the climax and the resolution, where the story ends and all the loose ends are tied up. Okay, next one. Here's the graph. This is a basic plot diagram. Your opening exposition, what's going to be, and you know, it wouldn't hurt you to draw that somewhere in your plans that you are drawing for your, I draw everything out for my stories so that I have kind of a plan. And you took the inciting moment. What is it that's happening? In one of my stories, it was that all the isotopes were disappearing. And that sounds really geeky, I know. But isotopes we use in our everyday life. And our everyday life was going to be jeopardized. So the conflict, how do we get it? The rising action. They go into action to try and get the guy who's got all the plans to this. And then it just goes from there. All right. Okay, so what kind of writer are you? The kind of writer you are determines maybe the way you plot or structure. Now, if we're talking about a pantser is someone who sits down and they start writing. They may have a basic idea of what they're going to do. I always think that's the Indiana Jones way to do it. And he's kind of the you know, I'm going to swing into action. Now, the plotters are a little bit different. How many of you are pantsers, first off?
Guilty.
Yeah. How many of you are plotters? Plotters plan everything out. They know where the characters come from. They know what they're going to do. They know what they're going to say. They know how the story's going to end. Those are plotters, just like the guy who goes up into space. I was a solar system ambassador for NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, and everything is planned out. I worked at Mission Control for one of the simulations at Space Camp, and you have a book, and everything is planned out. What you say, what you're going to tell the people on the spacewalk to do, all is planned. And so where you get into trouble if you worked at NASA. Like I also did a simulation where I was the mission specialist on the space shuttle that we had there. And so we were just all full of ourselves that we got all this things done. We were going by the book. Our pilot was doing all the checklists and all this kind of stuff. Somewhere, something got missed because when we got off of the shuttle and our trainer was sitting there like this, and we were giving high fives and all this, what a successful mission. She goes, you know, y'all are dead, right? And we go, what do you mean? She says, somebody forgot to shut the cargo bay doors when you were flying in. Ooh. So you're all burned up. So these plotters, they have everything spaced out what you're supposed to do. Now the planter is what I am. I'm a planter. I'm part plotter and I'm part planter.
That's me.
When I write, when I get my stories started, I know who all my characters are. Sometimes I even interview my characters. I know where they're going to go. I know they're going to go to Russia. So I better start studying up on Russia. I know they're going to try and figure out this whole cloaking thing. So man, I'm looking at the YouTubes on the cloaking. I do all that kind of work. Now, I know they've got to get those scientists back. I don't really know how they're going to get them back, but I throw in several different things of how possibly they can get them back. So I plan part of mine out, but to get from point A to point B, I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there. I know they've got to get there. I just don't know how they're going to get there. So I'm a planter, and I bet a lot of you are more planters than one or the other. I was very relieved to know that there was a spot for me when I was reading up on planters. Okay. Oh, and on the last one, the planters. You see, I have Raylan Gibbons on there. He is a sheriff on Justified. And so he's supposed to be the good guy. But he is not above making some alternate changes to what he should or shouldn't be doing. For instance, one of his famous lines that I just love is, if you don't want me to shoot you in the back, you shouldn't be running away from me.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's not above bending the law a little bit. So I'm kind of a planter. I don't always know how I'm going to get that guy to turn around and run back to me. All right, so next slide. All right, making it real for me. One of the things that I do, this is what it looks like in my head. I'm writing or getting ready to write. I'm all over the place. I sometimes work on several projects at once. I think I'm working on 4 or 5 right now. You can use all the fancy terminology, you read the books or on the website or anything. New York Times bestseller, author David Baldacci or any of those guys. But authors, you have to know that basically you have to write down what is best for you. Probably all of us in this room today, none of us really probably write the same way. We plot the same way. We structure the different ways. All right, so if you're a plotter or you're a painter, these are going to all make sense probably to you in one way or the other. So up here on the board, I have about 4 stories going on. And go ahead, you can turn it to the next one. One of the things I do is I have a notebook or a journal for every single project that I do. Every Enigma book I write, I have a different book for that. I have a journal for that. And what I put in there, I put interviews, I put story arcs. Some of them I never use. Some of them is just waking me up in the middle of the night and I write them down. And so I keep that notebook. Matter of fact, I guess it was in Enigma 6, maybe. I needed an FBI agent. I knew I had an FBI agent in book 2 or book 1. So I had to go back and figure out who was that guy. Because he just kind of walked on and walked off, but I needed him. So I went back and got him and brought him up to that particular book and developed that character. That helps when you structure your stories if you have, and I don't put it on my computer, because this way I can take it wherever I go, journal everywhere I go. Create a Pinterest board. I create a Pinterest board for every single book or a project that I do. And if we can we go back to the last slide? My Pinterest boards kind of look like this. So I will have, you see the mosque off to the left. One of my characters is a Sunni Muslim. And the gal above it, she is a rock star in another book, and she is a Kurd, a Syrian Kurd. And then we have the redhead and the guy above him. And so all of those stories over there, you know, he's a priest that rides a motorcycle, he's got his ear pierced, he is very unlikely priest. And so I can keep all that separated if in a Pinterest board. I can pull that up and study their picture and structure what it is they're going to do, what they look like, how they're going to behave. All right, go ahead and go to the next one. All right, so research. I keep all my research on the computer on that little disk that I make for that particular book so that I can access it. I print some of that out. But I do a lot of research because mine a lot of times has technology in it, the latest kind of military things. So I have to have that access. And so I keep that in there too. I also, in one series, I have a psychiatrist. And sometimes I have my psychiatrist go interview my characters so that I will begin to see a pattern develop with that particular characters, because they ask questions. It might probably wouldn't surprise you that your characters talk to you sometimes, and that's what happens in there. Music soundtrack. People always laugh that I have music soundtracks because my stories run like a movie in my head. They're, you know, they're full of Indiana Jones and Romancing Your Stones, all those kinds of things. So I find music soundtracks and I make that part of the structure of my story. I have fast parts and slow parts. All right, map out the beginning and the middle and the end, how you are going to do that. All right, go to the next one. All right, so the basic tools that I use is in my these 5 essential elements of a story. Who are the characters? What are they like? Do you have I love the questions that you had for your particular characters. I think those were so good. I'm going to use some of those and when I'm developing it, but I have some questionnaires that I have my characters fill out. You know, sometimes that doesn't apply to them. But, you know your characters backwards and forwards. And it's okay if something slips up and there's a surprise, even for you. That's the pantser in you, and that's okay. So, the setting. Where are all these places going to take place? Is it going to take place in Washington, D.C.? Is it going to take place in Siberia? Is it going to take place in Alaska? All those places, if I'm going around to all those different places, I want to know what that looks like. How am I going to build that scene? When I did Invisible Goodbye, I had to crash an airplane. So I had to structure my story around, I knew from the very beginning there was going to be a plane crash. But I didn't really want anybody to die, there at the end. So I studied airplanes, how to crash them, and all that kind of stuff. Well, by the time I got finished with that, and I found a plane that I could get out of Russia and get back to Alaska. Well, by the time I got finished, I felt like it was on life support. This is when you go and you look for somebody who can actually fly that plane. So one of my friends in Florida, who's an airline pilot, used to be a fighter pilot, now he flies for American Airlines. I sent it to him, he goes, yeah, a pilot's gonna kind of laugh at that. So it turned out that the information that I had, the structure that I had built around that was from the mid-90s. It wasn't current, but it didn't tell me that when I was doing my research. So sometimes in part of the scene that you build, be sure that you have the right information. All right, and then you want to have the resolution. Solving the problem. These essential elements keep the story running smoothly and allow the action to develop in a logical way that the reader can follow. All right. This is what one of my notebooks looks like. I will put down what chapter it is, because sometimes, you know, even though I'm a planter, sometimes I run up against a brick wall. So I will write something down, like chapter 8, I'll put down all the characters that are going to be in there. Then I'll start spiraling off. What do I want the setting to look like? What do I want the conflicts to be? And you know, a lot of times, this is enough to break that wall for me. Sometimes I'll use only one thing from that big thing. You can turn to the next one. This is another one. I have conflict, characters. I have all the things down there that I'm going to need. And it's not uncommon for me to get to near the end of the book. I'm thinking, I need some more action. I'll go back and look at some of those things that I structured early on and didn't use. Can I use them now? Sometimes I can. So those really help me out when I'm writing. So that's what my notes look like. All right, so when there's a surprise, I don't know about you guys, but if you're pantsers, this does not surprise you. You will write something and, oh, this is going to happen. This will be great. I'm going to put this in. Well, when I was writing Black Mamba, in some of my research, I came across this picture. I was mesmerized. This is in Africa, and this guy actually trains hyenas. It is amazing what they do to them and how they make them behave. And you know, I think about hyenas, they are vicious and mean. And I started reading about these guys who do this in Nigeria. I was just mesmerized. I thought, I've got to have that guy. I've got to put that guy somehow in my story. So I had to restructure it a little bit to make him one of the important things, because at the end, this hyena was going to get loose and do the job that the hero might not be able to do. The hyena's going to do it for him. So anyway, I had to rewrite, I had to add in, I had to research, and that added the tension that I needed. So when there is a surprise, when you write your novel, don't be afraid to restructure, cut something out, add something in. You never know, it might be the one sweet spot in your story. Now, he wasn't in there a lot. He was in there in the important times. Okay, so when there's a surprise, don't be afraid to use it. All right, so even if you are a plotter, don't be afraid to go back and include new information. One of the things that I've learned to do just in the last year or so is when I was writing Invisible Goodbye, one of my characters is a former astronaut. And he's the kind of guy that never saw a mirror he didn't like. He really thinks he's all that. So anyway, I didn't know where he fit in, but I knew he was going to have to fly my guys out, because he's a pilot too. So I started, when I would think of something that he would do or see, I would just write that down and kind of put it in a file. I mean, by the time I got that file, and I wouldn't do it every day. When I would think of something, oh, that would be funny if he did this, I would write that down and put it in that file. Meanwhile, the rest of the story was going on. And sometimes I would just add a little something saying, this would be something good to put in about Carter. That's all I would say. So when I got the book at a certain point where Carter had to be there all the time, then I went back and started putting those little pieces of information in. It made that book go so much faster when I did that. So now, when I'm writing Enigma 8, I've learned to do that again. There will be scenes that play in my head over and over. I just go write those scenes down, set them aside. I know eventually I'll get that scene, put it somewhere in the story. All right, so Pantsers, it's okay to admit something that you thought was revolutionary. Save it for another time or another book. Save those bright ideas for the next book that might not fit your current work in progress. And keep track of changes you want to make in the story. Don't stop writing. You can always go back and put those in. All right. So when escape is your only option, refer back to some of the structures that you're doing. Okay. I have tips, tricks, and potholes in the right place. You don't. Thank you. Anyway, if you are on Facebook, I'm there. If you want, I know Catherine, she's in my reader group. We do some fun things in there. But yes, back there. And then the right place to create, we do, I put tips on there to help you with your writing and your structure. So those two places you can find me on that. So do you have any questions about or tips that you'd like to give about plot and structure? Yes, Charlotte. Well, my journal and notebook helps. Well, I don't sleep a lot. I don't know, some stories, and what happens is I'll have these stories, like I have a story about this priest and two archaeologists that is running in my head. So I had to start them, and I don't know, I probably wrote 10, 11 chapters, and it just kind of ground to a halt. I know what's going to happen. And what started that was I watched the 60 Minutes documentary on Lalibela in Ethiopia. And it just had so many mysteries about who built them. And so I've been researching that. And so I would just put that in the file and set it aside. And I started the Enigma one again. I have the Dark Side series, which this next one's going to take place in St. Louis, just putting down the research, not actually writing it. So sometimes I'm just collecting research and information. Sometimes I'm just collecting pictures on Pinterest. Then when I start to write all that visuals, because I'm a visual learner. I don't know how many of you are, but I'm a visual learner. I have to see something to be able to. So I also have a fantasy started. YA. I've been working on it a long time, so you know, I don't know what to tell you except it just happens. The Enigma ones, they have, I think about them all the time. So yes, good question. Anybody else? Yes.
Maybe a dumb question, but how do you know the plot is strong enough?
Oh, that's a good one. All right, is it something you have to make sure that it is something everybody would care about? For instance, I have a sample here that, all right, so we call it the John and Mary story. John and Mary are living happily in a split-level bungalow. Canister descends to the earth right behind their house, and out of it comes a tentacle monster. What do? So is it something that's going to scare you? Is it something that's going to make a difference to you, like the isotopes? Nobody cares anything about isotopes. But if you found out that that's what keeps your food safe, if that's what keeps you to be able to have those tests in the hospital all of a sudden, oh, and not only that, maybe there's only 4 places in the world that they make the isotopes. And now they're in jeopardy. So all of a sudden you raise the stakes. She didn't even, like my main character, didn't even know what an isotope was until she got caught up in this stuff. And then it became obvious that I like subplots too. You know, in Unlikely Hero, she gets caught up in this isotope, but her husband and children are off somewhere else. And she finds out they're in danger from an assassin. And so she's torn between, you know, working toward the future and something immediate. So you've got these things tearing her apart. What makes you scared? You can also take John and Mary are living happily in a split-level bungalow, and Mary begins to suspect, is John cheating on her? Or how about this? John and Mary are living happily in a split-level bungalow. John discovers that Mary is mysteriously absent during parts of the night and has developed an alarming tendency to sleep in the bathtub with all the curtains drawn. What has happened? Do you care? All of a sudden, yeah, I kind of do. What are those strange white things that appear? Could it be that she's a vampire? What is John going to do? What about the children? Do they have white things too? So what kinds of things do you care about? What kinds of things would make a difference in your life and in your reader's life? I told Shirley a story the other day that it was a story about when I blew out my knee and ended up having to get a knee replacement. And she asked me, well, how did that happen? And I said, well, my husband, is in the mining industry. We had to go to Switzerland for a big conference. And I said, we were in Switzerland, so by golly, I was gonna ski. No, I don't know how to ski. I was gonna ski. So I skied and she goes, oh. And so I said, yeah. So what did I do? I get up on those skis and I ended up head over heels. And it's a wonder I hadn't killed myself, but busted my knee. So she's going, oh. And I said, well, that's not really what happened. I said, what really happened is I came out of my classroom and stepped on a pencil eraser and went splat on the floor after school. Nobody saw me. And she goes, oh, you. And so one is more interesting than the other. So is it going to be interesting? Nobody cares that I stepped on a pencil eraser. They go, yeah, I already knew she was a klutz. But if I fell and hurt myself skiing in Switzerland, that's a little bit more interesting. So what's interesting to your reader? Good question. Anybody else?
How do you target your reading audience?
Well, I target them because I write mostly domestic thrillers.
Mhm.
So when I first started out, I changed my name to Tierney James because I thought, I'm writing thrillers, I'm writing somewhat with the military. So I wanted guys to read my book too. But the fact of it is, 70 to 80% of the books bought are bought by women.
Mhm.
So after I'd written several, they already knew who it was. So I target women, like my main character, her gift is she makes great chocolate chip cookies and can shoot a Glock, So, she helps solve problems because she learned how to do this when she was teaching her boys. She was the den mother for the Boy Scouts. So I now target women, although I repeatedly rank high in the military part because, I've got a lot of military people in my stories. But so now I don't worry about the guys reading it. I worry about the gals reading it. And I like to target something that women would like to think they could do. Can I work for Homeland Security and not get caught? Can I go to Russia and help save the day? Can I, one of my characters ended up in Afghanistan with the Undersecretary of State. And she was just going along to help with a women's conference. But they asked her to go pick up these 6 little orphan girls. And so when she did, before they came back to get her, the helicopter crashed. And she had no way out. And the Taliban went away. So, as moms, and, we think, oh my gosh, what would I do? So I like to put those kinds of things in, those kind of bells and whistles. Yeah. Things that we think, oh yeah, I can do that. The seat of your pants kind of action But yet you've got to slow it down too sometimes. Good question. Anybody else? Yes.
Your notebooks that you create for each of your books, where you're kind of going through and brainstorming your plot, your structure. Do you do something similar for your overall series, like an arc for your series?
No, I'll break each book down. And that will, when you write a series, sometimes that will change. You know, like I was only going to write one book. I'm on book 8.
Yeah, that was my other question was, did you know like when you started writing that book that you were going to have more?
I
and it
knew
just
by book
evolved?
2 I was going to. Matter of fact, the whole series started when I lived in California, and we had moved out there because my husband was a mine engineer, and people would come up to me and call me Melanie. I said, Melanie, what are you doing? I haven't seen you forever. And they would just talk, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, not her. And I would tell my family, and they didn't believe me. Oh, you're just making that up. You're just writing a story. I said, no, I'm not. That's the truth. And then when we went to the county fair, this guy came up, turned me around, he said, Melanie, I haven't seen you forever. What's going on? And then he saw my son and daughter, and he goes, oh, wait a minute, not her. And my son was going, gosh, she's not lying again. You know, so it was always like that story. So that's where the Enigma series started in my head, and that was back in the 90s. I did not write that to 2013. So you never know where those kinds of things are going to happen and spur, but that was part of the very first story. That guy coming up to me. They wouldn't give me a driver's license because there was somebody in Santa Barbara. I sang everywhere I went. So, you know, I've been teased one too many times at my house. So Bandwagon had left a coupon for me to get flowers. So I went to the florist and I ordered flowers and I said, will you deliver it? She said, yeah. So I gave them my address and they said, what do you want on the card? I said, to Melanie from you know who. So the kids were saying, oh my gosh, look at that. And so when my husband got home, he goes, who's that from? I go, you silly. That was pretty funny that you did that. I didn't do that. So, you know, it's just, you know, my mind just works like that. I know it's annoying to my family. Anybody else? How many of you write thrillers or mysteries? Okay. Do you have a particular difficult, bumpy road sometimes with those?
Sometimes I have, I kill so many people that it's difficult not to kill 2 people in the same way. But just other than that, no, not really. What can I say? I like killing people.
I'm working on one where the murderer is female and ends up being as a spree serial killer. And it's a little challenge. There are not many.
There are not many.
There's
Yeah, not many.
Well, that's disappointing because that's my next storyline that I'm going to be working on.
Apparently, too. You know, the movie Monster. That was a female serial killer. And yeah, I didn't realize till then that it's probably a good thing we did it.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
You're probably more than they know.
They do that a lot, absolutely.
And they're
Cunning sometimes, aren't we?
And they attend PTA, work for Homeland Security.
Like that story, Crazy Women, and we learned to hide our.
That would fit in perfectly with the routine of women have to do twice as much, twice as well.
Absolutely.
In order to get half the credit. So fortunately, that's not difficult.
Very true.
I don't know what time it is or.
About 7 minutes.
Okay.
But so
Did everybody get a handout?
I did not.
So I would just like to thank Tierney for coming. I'll come by and give this to you, for speaking to us about plot and structure today. And we just want to give you a little
thank
token of
you.
appreciation. Tulsa NightWriters. So thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the session on creating emotions or crafting emotions. I hope you all get excited about that. But the first thing I want to tell you is that the final score is OSU 32, Texas 25.
Is that a hockey game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was hockey. I would like to introduce Rex Griffin. He is our current president for the Tulsa NightWriters, and we have begged him to stay, but we're still begging. He's also an OU grad and pretty proud of it. He studied under Jack Bickham, Donald Mass, Lisa Cron, James Scott Bell, several others. He has a novel coming out in December. It's called Moon of Black Hearts. Now, when I talked with Rex, he said he has a superpower. His superpower is sitting on the couch and watching OU football. And when he says, I'm sooner born and sooner bred, and I will die sooner dead, he can prove it. He has OU already on his gravestone. Not that he's planning on using it anytime soon. But I would like you to welcome Rex Griffin.
I'm certainly a Cowboy fan this morning or this afternoon. Go OSU, all you folks. We have any historical fiction writers in here today? Okay, I've got a joke for you guys. 2 Roman centurions walk into a bar. The barkeep says, "What do you have?" And the first centurion says, "I'll have a Martinez." And the barkeep says, "Don't you mean a martini?" And he said, "Hey, if I wanted to, I would have asked for one." Well, I am Rex Griffin, and I'm a novelist, and you'll have to adapt these ideas for any shorter work you may write. The 2 words I want you to remember today are elevate and excavate. I hope to show you how you can elevate your story from the ordinary by excavating deep into emotions. Readers want an emotional experience. When they're done, they want to feel like they have been through something. In talking about crafting emotions, am I too loud?
No, you're perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm talking not so much about portraying the character's emotions as about evoking emotions in the reader. That's the holy grail for storytellers. The best fiction doesn't just tell a story. It keeps your readers up nights by allowing them to experience the story as if they were the protagonist, with all the twists and turns, so that in their minds they're asking themselves, is that the way I would do it? Would I react that way? That means getting in their heads and hearts and making them chew on your story. A big portion of that comes from Viewpoint, which is why either first person or third person immersion is so popular these days. But Viewpoint deserves and has received its own section earlier today, and thus is a topic for another time. Beyond Viewpoint, a reader puts him or herself in the story by bonding with the protagonist. The protagonists vary as widely as our imagination can take us, so it's helpful to narrow them down to 4 different types. First, there's the everyman or everywoman. If they're just like us readers, we bond with them immediately, right? Well, no, not exactly. Do you bond with every person you run across? Every regular Joe or Jenny? No. But if there's something special about them, something admirable, you're attracted to that, aren't you? James Scott Bell talks of protagonists having grit, wit, and it, meaning perseverance, a sense of humor, or an alluring charm. All admirable qualities. Are you more drawn to the guy who spills coffee on his pants and says, well, I got to go home and change? Or are you drawn to the guy who spills it on his pants and go, well, I knew I should have worn brown today? Show us an admirable quality in your every man. Give us something to look up to in your every woman, something inviting, and your reader will bond with them. The second kind of protagonist is the genuine hero, someone who has always done big things, carried high responsibilities, or faced great danger. People like that are hard for an average guy like me to connect with, unless there is something about them, him or her, that makes him or her like everyone else. What's ordinary about your hero? Does your Superman step in a wad of chewing gum every time he lands? I knew a guy that moonlighted. I had a friend of mine that moonlighted as a wrestler. He was kind of, he looked overweight, but he was muscular, and he was one of these bad guys. Wore the mask, and he was like a local wrestler. That was kind of his superpower. Yet he was terrified of spiders. I mean, the little spider, he'd scream and run off, and it was hysterical, you know. Your reader can connect with a hero that has fears, gripes, and problems like everyone else. The third kind of protagonist is the dark or damaged protagonist, somebody or even something that is burdened, wounded, or suffering in some way. She may be human, semi-human, or non-human, but there is some burden they carry. I had a good friend die a couple of years ago, and I would have moved heaven and earth to help him, but I couldn't because he never wanted to help himself. He was an alcoholic. Readers will pour their hearts out trying to help. If the damaged protagonist, dark protagonist, the third protagonist is trying to better themselves, whether alcoholic or werewolf, readers will be side by side pulling for that dark protagonist that yearns to be better for themselves or for others, to overcome the burden, wound, or suffering that plagues them. If they have hope, so will your reader. Think in terms of like the Elephant Man or Wolf Man or the Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is your dark, damaged protagonist that wants to be better, that wants to be wrong. The fourth kind of protagonist is the shady protagonist, person who pushes the edges or even goes over the line of what is legal or moral. How do you get an honest, law-abiding reader to empathize with someone who wrongs others? By making them aware what they do is wrong. A perfect example is Dexter from the TV series. He's a serial killer, but he knows he's a serial killer and he knows it's wrong. So he only kills other serial killers. Now, to my mind, I would think there would be a definite pool that you would eventually run out of with serial killers. But I guess he lives in Florida, so there's no limit there. By being self-aware, the shady protagonist becomes easier to sympathize with, especially if, like the dark protagonist, he yearns to change. Needing to solve plot problems is not the same thing as forging a human bond. On a deeper level, we connect with others and with protagonists because we see something in them we see or want to see in ourselves, even if they're not like us at all. What readers and protagonists share is heart. Link them together and readers will relish the experience. Now let me talk about the three levels of emotion. Crafting emotion means excavating. So there's that word again. Excavating deeper into your characters. Too often we as writers settle for the first emotion that comes along, the emotional reaction anyone would have in a story situation. But this is just the first level of emotion, the surface level emotion, that low-hanging fruit that your reader will skim right over and forget. Your job, author, is to excavate. Don't settle for that first level of emotion. Dig for that second level. What's behind that first level of emotion? What's the hidden emotion here? Is he mad because because deep down he doubts himself? Does she cry not because she's hurt, but because she's afraid of what's going to happen next? Now your reader is getting involved instead of skimming past the normal emotion. Now she is wondering if she would react that way too. She is no longer reading a story, she is having an experience, the reader that is. But don't stop there. You can and should excavate even deeper. Excavate into that third level of emotion, which is often a surprise emotion. Have you ever been in a situation you thought such and such would happen, and when it happened, you'd react in a certain way, and when it actually happened, your reaction was totally opposite the way you thought it would be? That's the surprise emotion. For example, Joe dumps Jenny. First level, Jenny cries, heartbroken. Second level, she doesn't really care about losing Joe. She's worried about if she can live alone. Then Jenny laughs, surprising herself. Why? Because she realizes she's finally rid of that jerk she's put up with for so long and has her freedom. That's the third level, the surprise emotion. No better way to surprise a reader than when the character surprises him or herself. It will surely ensnare your reader in your story and make them wonder if they would react that way too. They certainly won't skim past it. Elaborate on that third level too. You can excavate that third level of emotion in creative ways. How? Examine it in detail. First, try creating an analogy. What else does that emotion feel like? Second, make a moral judgment about it. Is it good or bad to feel that way? Why is it good or bad to feel that way? Then create an alternative. What would a better person feel instead? Finally, justify the feeling. It's the only possible thing to feel at this moment, and this is why. Then, as always, and always try to do this, find a detail that only your protagonist will see in his or her own unique way. How about an example of all that? From Daphne du Maurier's My Cousin Rachel. A young and headstrong Philip Ashley has been raised by his beloved cousin Ambrose, the confirmed bachelor. When Ambrose, for health reasons, must winter in Italy, Philip is devastated, must stay behind to manage Ambrose's estate. Philip is desperately miserable without Ambrose, and then comes an even greater blow. A letter breaking the news that Ambrose has met and fallen in love with and married a distant cousin of theirs, the vivacious but mysterious Rachel. Du Maurier handles this way. Moment of drama. The letter came about 5:30, just after I had dined. Luckily, I was alone. Seacombe had brought in the post bag and left it with me. I put the letter in my pocket and walked out across the fields down to the sea. Seacombe's nephew, who had the mill cottage on the beach, said good day to me. He had his net spread on the stone wall, drying in the last of the sun. I barely answered him, and he must have thought me curt. I climbed over the rocks to a narrow ledge jutting into the little bay where I used to swim in summer. Ambrose would anchor 50 yards out in his boat, and I would swim to him. I sat down and taking the letter out of my pocket, read it again. If I could have felt one spark of sympathy, of gladness, one single ray of warmth towards those two who were sharing happiness together down in Naples, it would have eased my conscience. Ashamed of myself, bitterly angry at my selfishness, I could raise no feeling in my heart at all. I sat there numb with misery, staring at the flat, calm sea. I had just turned 23, and yet I felt as lonely and as lost as I had done years before, sitting on a beach in fourth form at Harrow, with no one to befriend me and nothing before me, only a new world of strange experience that I did not want. Morier does not stop with, I felt miserable, the obvious emotion. She digs deeper. She uses a metaphor, the swimming memory, and an analogy for Philip's inner state, lonely on the beach at Harrow. She lists alternative feelings that Philip might feel: sympathy, gladness, happiness. She, or rather Philip, makes a moral judgment about his feelings, shame, and Philip feels justified in his feelings. To sum it up, here's the 4 steps again: an analogy, alternatives, moral judgment, and justification. Rather than simply saying what Philip feels, Du Maurier gives us an array of emotional possibilities and why there are no real alternatives to what he feels, Philip feels. Tell readers what to feel and they won't feel it. Light an unexpected match, though, and the readers will ignite their own feelings. Another way to ensnare the reader, to use William Bernhardt's phrase, is to cross the line. Has everybody here seen or read the book Lonesome Dove?
Yeah.
Great book, just full of emotions. Among all the great scenes and lines in that book, one small scene sticks with me. You might remember Gus and Paul are out driving cattle on the trail early on the trail and take time to go to a saloon in a town. I think it was San Antonio. A picture from their younger days as successful Texas Rangers is hanging on the wall. Gus is proud of it and tries to brag to the bartender, who could care less and treats him just like a couple of saddle bombs. All of a sudden, Gus grabs the bartender's head and smashes his face on the bar, breaking his nose. Now, I didn't like that. Gus was somebody I really enjoyed. I kind of bonded with him. He's a friendly guy, and I really liked him, rooted for him. And it bothered me that he did something so mean and over the top. And that's the whole point. The author, Larry Mercury, made me react emotionally. I wouldn't do that. McMurtry put a burr under my saddle about that incident to the point it still bothers me to this day. A great story will leave your reader thinking about it long after. Now, Gus didn't rant at the bartender. He could have. He could have cussed and yelled and told off the bartender. He could have let it all out. And so can you. What in your life really makes you mad? A situation or idea? Politics? Plenty of mad to go around about politics these days. Religion, family, the teenager, traffic. We're not going to do this exercise, but here's an idea. Pick something that really aggravates you. Write a page or so about it. Let your anger loose and unload on that page. Let them have it. Give them what for. Rant. When you're finished and you've let it all out, see if it fits somewhere in your story. Can your protagonist or maybe some other character feel that way about the same thing, or maybe about something else? Too often we hold back the deeper emotions of our characters. Let it all out on the page and your reader will feel it. And it doesn't have to be an angry rant. It could be like a celebration, just extreme happiness or something. A good place for an angry rant is on some minor issue, making it big. For example, Joe, the boss, may not know Jenny's mother is dying. So when Jenny asks for a day off and Joe refuses, it might be a minor thing for him. But to her, it's huge. She explodes on him, letting it all out, calling him every name in the book, and ends up crying in front of him. Just goes through this whole range of emotions. Making small things big is a powerful way to ensnare your readers' emotions and make them ask, would I do that too? By the way, this technique is frequently used in comedy. Have your characters take insignificant problems and blow them up. Once again, for who are in my last class, Seinfeld and the Soup Nazi. No soup for you. You know, it's just soup, man. They make a small thing and blow it up like it's out of proportion. It's just soup, you know. In a more serious story, you don't want to overuse making small things big, else at some point it'll lose its effect. But it can be extremely effective once or twice in the story. Perhaps even more powerful is making big things small. And how many of you have been to the Oklahoma City bombing memorial in Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
If you go, take some Kleenex. Because I've seen tough guys you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley struggle to hold back their tears. Matter of fact, I've been one of them. And it was totally unexpected for me. I knew the story of Timothy McVeigh bringing the Murrow building down with the truck bomb. The thing that brought tears to my eyes wasn't the deaths or the destruction. What brought tears to my eyes as I went through the memorial were the details. The man's glasses with the broken lens, the woman's purse, handle torn from one side, wedged between fallen pillars. The baby's doll, missing an arm and leg, made white with concrete dust. Small details evoke big feelings because they have the power of suggestion. Details work too in all levels of description, especially in a scene setting or your story world. Oftentimes, writers describe what they see and leave it at that. Description can be elegant, even beautiful, but it has no impact and is usually the first thing a reader will skip. How do you get your reader emotionally involved? By getting your viewpoint character emotionally involved. Think about the world of your current work in progress. What's important about your story world? Not to you, to your characters. How does your protagonist feel about the story? What experiences have made your protagonist feel that way? What details does your protagonist notice that no one else notices? What does that detail mean to him or her and why? What feelings or memories does it provoke? Is it a symbol, a threat, a promise? Does it invoke awe, dread? What does your protagonist notice other people that other people might not? What stands out to your protagonist in the story world? What is your protagonist seeing others wouldn't? I've said that about 3 times. What is one thing that makes it look or smell or sound like it does? This place is different. How? This is the kind of place where what happens? What is going to happen here? What test, experience awaits your point of view character? Every culture, community, and family has rules. What's the number one rule in your story world? The rule everyone lives by. What's the unspoken or unwritten? What is the rule most people don't know, or the one they ignore? What is the rule that are enforced on some but not on others? Who enforces the rules? Is someone charged with enforcement, or is there some kind of secret society, maybe vigilantes who do the enforcement? How do they enforce it? with warning or without? And who breaks these rules? How are they punished? Are they broken on the wheel, thrown in a dungeon, drummed down to the core, caned, keel-hauled, banished to a deserted island or a frozen wasteland? Every job has their own terminologies that outsiders don't understand. What is the terminology of your story world? Or the special codes or languages or symbols? What is celebrated in your story world? How is it celebrated? What are the rites of passage, of marriage, of birth and death? Do they celebrate with dance? Maybe the minuet, a stomp dance, a polka, or the Virginia reel? Do they sing or chant or play music? Do they celebrate with food? Now, what do they eat? Gruel, jellied eels, crab cakes, terrapin stew, pheasant under glass? Or maybe like the French, I think of the 1500s, they fed lobsters to their prisoners because they thought they found them on the bottom of the ocean floor. Are there legendary places in your story world? Is there a lover's lane, a haunted house, and an enchanted forest? A place everybody goes or somewhere no one will venture? Is there an unsolved mystery people can't forget or a biting danger they can't ignore? What are the local delicacies, vices? Do they drink, smoke, gamble? I think it was the ancient Mayans would gamble their families and even themselves, their own freedom on a bet. Does your character enjoy these things or not? Why or why not? What does your character find wonderful about this world? Intolerable? What about this place bothers your character? What does she love? What does he hate? What makes your character long to leave? What holds them in place? What would they give up to stay or leave this place? One thing's for sure, at this point, we're far from a mere description of how the place looks. These kind of things will ensnare your reader's emotions, created by what he or she feels when he or she dwells in your story. The more we feel, the more we experience, the more alive and real and memorable your story world will become. When we have highly emotional experiences in the story world, it comes alive on the page. Your reader will hate to leave it, can't wait to return. Excavate again. Dig deep into your characters. Find those hidden and surprise emotions. But what if you come across an emotion you can't describe? How can you describe with words the fleeting beauty of life, the exquisite ache of inexpressible love, the irony of it all? How do you evoke something nameless without naming it? The least effective way of doing it is with pregnant pauses, significant looks, or charged gestures. Overused devices like that have little effect and are readily forgotten. A better way to do it is with analogy. Compare and contrast it to something else. A metaphor or simile goes a long way in revealing an indescribable emotion. But even better is to not try to describe an emotion at all. Unique feelings are situational specific. Nameless feelings are deep, conflicted, layered, and complex. Describing them is fruitless. It's much better to hold up a mirror to them by describing something else. We're talking about showing at the highest level. Find something solid or physical in the vicinity and have your protagonist obsess over something that stands in for the formless emotion. The protagonist's obsession may be positive or negative, hopefully both. Conflicted protagonist is the best kind. Detail your protagonist's gripes and delights and whatever the thing is. Observe what is good and bad, beautiful and ugly. meaningful, and empty. Be specific. Keep the focus off your protagonist and on this, whatever it is. And make sure nothing changes about it. Just leave things as they already are. Project what is formless onto something external, and the unidentified becomes solid and real. We've all felt the fleeting beauty of life and will again when your protagonist captures it by talking about something other than the fleeting beauty of life. Need another example? How about this one from M.L. Stedman's debut novel, The Light Between Oceans? It's about a character named Tom Sherborne, a veteran of the Great War, World War I, for those people who are non-historians, who becomes a lighthouse keeper on an island off the Australian coast. Early in the novel, Stedman explains why Tom isolates himself by capturing Tom's complex inner emotions as he stands high atop his lighthouse. Another dramatic poem. For the first time, he took in the scale of the nude. Hundreds of feet above sea level, he was mesmerized by the drop to the ocean, crashing against the cliffs directly below. The water sloshed around like white paint, milky thick, the foam occasionally scraped off long enough to reveal a deep blue undercoat. At the other end of the island, a row of immense boulders created a break against the surf and left the inside as calm as a bath. He had the impression he was hanging from the sky, not rising from the earth. Very slowly, he turned full circle, taking in the nothingness of it all. It seems his lungs could never be large enough to breathe in this much air. His eyes could never see this much space, nor could he hear the full extent of the rolling, roaring ocean. For the briefest moment, he had no edges. He blinked and shook his head quickly. He was nearing a vortex and pulling himself back. He paid attention to his heartbeat, felt his feet on the ground and his heels in his boots. He drew himself up to full height. He picked a point on the door of the light tower, a hinge that had worked itself loose, and resolved to start with that. Something solid. He must turn to something solid, because if he didn't, who knew where his mind or his soul could blow away to, like a balloon without ballast. That was the only thing that had got him through 4 years of blood and madness. Know exactly where your gun is when you daze for 10 minutes in your dugout. Always check your gas mask. See that your men have understood their orders to the letter. Don't think ahead in years or months. You think about this hour and maybe the next. Anything else is speculation. He raised the binoculars and scoured the island for more signs of life. He needed to see the goats, the sheep, to count them, stick to the solid, to the brass fittings, which had to be polished, the glass, which had to be cleaned. First the outer glass of the lanterns, then the prisms themselves. Getting the oil in, keeping the cogs moving smoothly, topping up the mercury to let the light glide. He gripped each thought like the rung of a ladder by which to haul himself back to the knowable, back to this life. What exactly is Tom feeling? Can you put it in a single word? No. He's still traumatized by his time in the trenches. The vast expanse of the ocean is too big to take in. He panics. To calm himself, he must focus on small, immediate details like the loose door hinge. The passage itself focuses on the ocean, the rocky shore, the waves, foam, guns, goats, sheep, brass fittings, oil, and prisms. But what is Stedman actually writing about? Tom and what he feels, which is the nothingness of it all. The smaller and more specific the imagery, the more universal and expansive the unspoken feelings of the Viewpoint character. Once again, small details turn into big feelings. So Susan sleeps in the backpack there. To sum it all up, basically what you want to do is wrap your reader up in the emotions of the character and of the story, so that when a character reacts, the reader will chew on it, asking, would I act that way? Would I do that too? But to make your reader react, your character has to let the reader inside. After all, we open our hearts to those who first open their hearts to us. For characters' hearts to be open to readers, characters must talk quite a bit about what's going on inside. That means both welcoming the readers inside and making them curious or uneasy about where they are. True emotional involvement comes not when a reader likes a character, but when the reader cannot avoid his or her own self-examination, whether she's aware it's happening or not. Strong feelings are an invitation or a challenge. They press us to judge what characters feel. We sympathize with them or not, but we become engaged on our own. If your reader has bonded with your character, you can play the character's needs in a way that will twist your reader, keeping them off balance and emotionally involved. When characters struggle with their feelings, when they go through the emotional anguish of a dilemma, it challenges readers to consider what they would do if the dilemma were theirs. The reader will hold an inner debate. Would I do that too? They will chew and be motivated by your story. One last joke. In Africa, a reader and a writer are sitting under the wide mushroom-shaped canopy of an acacia tree. The reader's poring over a book and the writer's typing on his laptop. A lion comes along behind him, takes one look at the two, leaps on the reader and eats him up. The moral of the story, even the king of the jungle knows Reader's Digest and Writer's Craft. Please hold your rotten tomatoes and eggs. Don't forget, excavate emotions to elevate your story. Thank you. I guess I should say, are there any questions? We got a couple of minutes.
Get back up there then.
Oh. Better yet, any more jokes you want to hear?
Not after that last one.
I got another writer's joke.
What is it? What is it?
A writer died and was given the option of going to heaven or hell. She decided to check out each place first. As the writer descended into the fiery pit, she saw row upon row of writers chained to their desks in the steaming sweatshop. As they worked, they were repeatedly whipped with thorny lashes. Oh my, said the writer, let me see heaven now. A few moments later, as she descended into heaven, she saw rows of writers change their desks in the steaming sweatshop. As they worked, they too were whipped with thorny lashes. Wait a minute, this is just like hell. Oh, no, it's not, an unseen voice replied. Here, your work gets published. That was a little better.
That's a little better.
Anybody have any questions?
I do. Rex, I know that you write historical fiction.
Yes.
So how do you take these rules and apply them into a past scene?
You apply them to the characters.
Okay.
I mean, the world building, yeah, that part of it apply to the past. Oddly enough, and for historical writers, I'm not telling them anything new. Historical fiction, writing setting in a historical fiction is kind of similar to writing section in like a fantasy or a sci-fi novel. But the difference is, instead of being wholly made up, you're basically talking about a story world that does not exist. For fiction and sci-fi, they've never existed, but for historical, they did exist at one time but no longer exist. So you've got to paint your story world kind of in the same way for your reader. You have to go into pretty deep detail. You have to make sure they know what you're talking about.
And since you're basing it on history, how do you validate the scene that you're writing in? I mean, if you're writing about Gettysburg, you've got to know something about Gettysburg. How do you go back and validate all of that and know that you're doing it right?
Well, that's where the research comes.
Okay.
And a big problem, check me on this, historical writers. A big problem with historical writing is not that you don't do enough research, that you do too much. And you want to put everything, it's so cool to you, you want to put all the details in, but your story will bog down with all the details. And you got to be very circumspect about what you put in, because you're trying to serve the story, not just put in all the cool information.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. That young lady in the back.
I'm trying to understand what that deep emotion, that
Well, a deep point of view, I think you might be, I haven't heard that term before. I think you might be referring to immersive point of view, or what I've heard of is immersive. That is deep into your character, where everything is experienced, not just through the eyes of the character, but through their emotions and their own internal processing as well. And yeah, that's digging deep into the emotions of a character. Well, go OSU. Thank you all very much for listening to me.
Just wanted to appreciate Rex and all he has done. I think we have a little bit of a break before we get that. So enjoy. Spend time mixing and matching, I guess.
Sure, come back.
All right.
Okay, everybody. The day is coming to an end. And have you all had a good time?
Oh, yeah.
Speakers. We owe Jim a big thank you for finding this location for us. Our thanks go to a lot of people, but right now I know everybody is waiting for this.
The giveaway.
The first one is Stephanie Hutchison. Stephanie, okay, y'all know, you gotta be here to get this. All right.
Have we gotten everybody in?
I think so. Marion, is there anybody else out there? Just a couple of speakers. Okay, so we're gonna pull another one. Thank you. Donna Jones.
Done.
You are a sweetheart. And we thought this would be perfect for all the sweethearts.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Our next giveaway is a donation from Ziegler's. Does everybody know where Ziegler's
I don't. No.
is? They're on, is it Lewis and Admiral, whatever. And anyway, they donated sassy soaps, and believe it or not, each bar is worth $8.
Ooh.
They donated 5, and there's a candle here. Let's see.
Well, I should have put my name in the hat. That's all there is to it.
Oh, they smell delicious. Alan Lake. We have here something that I'm sure all of you know, where Gardner's bookstore is.
Oh, yeah.
Gardner's gave us a $25 gift certificate. So let's see who is the lucky recipient. And that is Kristen Headley. For $25, y'all be able to get a lot of books.
I
at
know.
Gardner's. And I know you saw the necklace if you walked past, made by Julie Kimmel Harbaugh, who was one of our speakers. She has, she makes jewelry, sells them on the internet, Julie wraps. And so she donated one of her handmade necklaces. Let's see who gives it. Connie Dodson.
Oh, look at it.
Okay. Tierney James was so kind and donated a pen, and I think this is a key light on a keychain, and the neatest little memo book with flags in them. And so we have her to thank for this donation.
Who donated it?
Tierney.
Nancy Hartman.
Oh, yeah.
Something every writer needs
Boy, ain't that the truth.
is paper. And Office Depot donated a couple of reams. We had to use a ream for some handouts. Or, I'm sorry. But let's see who gets Karen Davenport. Yay! Okay. How many of y'all know where Mecca Coffee is?
Oh, yeah.
Mecca Coffee, oh, this smells so good. She donated a pound of coffee and a Mecca Coffee cup. And there's some coasters in here from our fearless leader, wherever she is, and a tea towel. Mix it up really good. Mary Lou Montgomery.
Cool.
Smells so good. Thank you. And of course, I guess I need to tell you guys to give thanks. If you go to like Mecca and say, you know, I won a pound of coffee at a writers conference, Office Depot, any place you happen to be that has donated, do recognize the fact. All right. Now, who gets an autographed copy from out behind the mask with Purell and black mask? Let's see who gets this. The COVID kit. Yeah, the only thing we didn't have is the vaccine in it, right? Sally Britton. Yeah.
Baskets were.
Yeah. And a word of thanks to our very intrepid vice president who put all this together, who gathered together speakers and
Tirelessly.
begged Jim for the venue here. So much work goes into putting on a conference, especially when you're dealing with COVID. I would like to present Tony's flowers to Catherine.
Absolutely.
She's the best. She's the best. She's the best.
Guys, Are you crying?
Yes.
I guess that does this.
Well, let him close it out.
Let me say a couple words. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate everything everybody did. The Night Writers are having a meeting Tuesday night at OSU Tulsa, 700 block of North Greenwood. I'm not exactly sure the address. Bill Wetterman will be the speaker, and I'm not sure what he's speaking on.
Yeah, the address is on our website.
There you go.
How to promote your book.
Oh, how to promote your book. Thank you all for coming out. This has been the 5th annual, although we skipped a year because of COVID. We'll look forward to seeing you at the 6th annual next year. Thank you very much.